welcome back to the DSR channel. This is week 9, and they an hour ago released Forgotten Realms: Heroes of Faerun, the new book, first book, expansion book since the 2024 Source Books update. And I want to talk about Circle Magic. Been looking forward to this one. Very exciting, and I think it's a thumbs up. I like it a lot. And I was at the gym, and I was just too excited to wait, so I ran home from the gym, finished my workout. You don't want to cut short on that. It was chest day. Finished my workout, ran home, and put this together so we can get this information out there. Nice flavor text. Circle magic. Millennia ago, mages researching alternative magic traditions developed a technique by which many spellcasters working together could cast spells beyond the limit of any individual. This technique became known as circle magic, and although it was initially developed by elves, spellcasters in Thay and Rashaman reinvented the technique, and from there it quickly spread to other realms in Faerun. What is a circle spell? When a group of spellcasters collectively channel their magic into a single spell, they enhance and augment the spell's magic in powerful ways. A spell cast in this way is known as a circle spell. Eligible spells. Any spell that has a casting time of an action or 1 minute or longer and is cast using a spell slot can be cast as a circle spell. To cast a circle spell, follow the usual rules for spell casting as described in the player's handbook, as well as the following rules for circle spells. So first up, this is interesting in that there's no restriction or very little restrictions on which spells can be used in circle casting. So it's not limited to a very small subset of spells. It's actually most of the spells in the game. The things that are being eliminated really are just reaction spells and bonus action spells. Pretty much anything else qualifies, because everything is either, other than those, either is cast as one action or 1 minute or longer. So that's every other spell in the whole game. So here's the rules on casting a circle spell. A circle spell has one primary caster, you. Unless otherwise specified, you as the primary caster decide the spell's targets, maintain concentration if required by the spell's duration entry, provide the spell's components, expend the slot for casting the spell, and decide any other options noted in the spell's description. The spell effect originates from you. Now, they don't spell it out anywhere, but I think you, the one initiating it, also decide on which spell is being cast. It's not explicitly spelled out, but it doesn't make sense any other way. So initiating a circle spell. You take a magic item to initiate casting a circle spell. When you do so, choose the circle casting option. See more rules below you're using for this casting. You must also meet any of the other requirements described in the options text. Until circle spell's casting is complete, you must maintain concentration on the spell. If a reaction would trigger when a creature casts a spell, such as the reaction taken to cast counterspell, it also triggers when you take this action to initiate a circle spell. I had to read that last bit a few times before I understood what they were going for there. What they mean is when you start casting a circle spell, just like any other spell, if that would trigger a reaction, then that reaction still occurs, right? So if you cast a fireball, that triggers the opportunity for a reaction to counterspell the fireball, right? And they're saying the exact same thing here. If you circle spell cast a fireball, that also triggers the same reaction so that somebody can counterspell your circle spell casting a fireball. That's all they're saying. All right, now we'll get into the meat of what is different here, and that's the secondary casters. That's the secondary casters are the whole point of circle spell casting. Okay, more than one person is casting a spell in a circle. Well, it doesn't have to be a circle. They call it a circle, but I guess it could be a square, triangle, whatever you like. Casting a circle spell requires that one or more other spellcasters, called secondary casters, lend their magic to the spell. A secondary caster must have either the spell casting or pact magic feature to participate in a circle spell. After you initiate the spell, each secondary caster takes the magic action to contribute to the spell. A secondary caster can take this action only while within 30 feet of you and before the start of your next turn. So they did a really good job of making this both succinct and open, okay? I was worried they're going to make this really complicated, have a lot of rule mechanics around who can do this and how and whatnot. It's actually really easy. So the secondary casters just have to have the spell casting or pact magic features. Now, spell casting is a specific feature, right? It's not the ability to cast any spell. So if you're a fighter, battle master, and you take like Fey Touched, which allows you to cast a couple of spells once per day for free, that is not the spell casting feature. So you don't qualify for this. But if you're an Eldritch Knight, you have the spellcasting feature and you qualify for this. So Eldritch Knight qualifies, the Arcane Trickster qualifies, every half caster qualifies, and of course every full caster qualifies, and Warlocks by virtue of the Pact Magic feature. Okay, so that's the qualification, which is, 8 of 9 of the 13 base classes in the game, plus 2 of the subclasses for the for 2 of the classes that don't qualify. So it's really, really open. Secondarily, you just take the magic action. You don't have to cast the same spell. There's no rules that you have to know that spell or have it on your spell list or anything, right? You just take the magic action to contribute, and you have to be within 30 feet, and you have to take the magic action before the start of the caster's next turn, the originator's next turn. So you have 1 round for everybody to start circle casting. Okay. By the time it gets back to the casters who started its turn, it is too late for anybody else to contribute. Okay. And they added some nice guidance for DMs in allowing NPC casters to be secondary casters as well, because a lot of NPC casters no longer have spell slots. In fact, most of the time they don't. They just have free castings per day. And this gives guidance on how to allow that as well. They can use, at the DM's discretion, allow those free uses of spells to count as casting, expending a spell slot to count as a secondary caster. So that's nice too. So now you're, NPCs that might be following you around or helping you, or you're helping them, can also contribute to circle casting. All right, completing the casting. If the spell has a casting time of an action, the spell's effect occurs immediately after the final secondary caster takes the required action to contribute to the spell. You decide which secondary caster is the final one. So if there's 5 of you, you start the spell, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th person is going to contribute theirs. As soon as they contribute by taking the magic action, the spell takes effect. It doesn't take effect when you cast. It takes effect when the final caster takes their magic action. Okay. And you get to decide who is the final caster. So you can just look down the initiative turn order and decide, oh, that's ally is going to be the final caster. We're going to take effect then. Okay. If the spell has a casting time of 1 minute or more, you and each secondary caster must take the magic action on each of your turns for the entire duration. And you must each maintain concentration while you do so. In this case, if any caster's concentration is broken, the spell fails. So this is much more risky. Okay. It's like ritual casting, but all of you have to ritual cast. So ritual casting, or any spell that has a casting time of longer than an action, requires that you take the magic action every round, every one of your turns, and you concentrate. So this is the same. It's just that all of you have to do this now. So you've decided the spell. They're all just contributing the magic action, but now they're all concentrating and doing the magic action for the entire time. So you probably, just like before, I wouldn't do this in combat, right? Because 1 minute in combat is 10 rounds. So if you're gonna have 5 of you do this, then that's 5 people taking their magic action and concentration, trying to maintain that for 10 rounds. If any of you gets your concentration broken, the circle spell ends and fails. And what does that mean? Spell failure. If a circle spell fails, nothing happens. You don't expend a spell slot, and any material components aren't consumed. To cast the spell again, you must start over. So there's the only downside to the failing a circle casting is that you got to start over. So you've just wasted or lost time, which is perhaps another reason to not do this in combat. But if you're in the middle of some massive, gigantic end of the campaign war type combat, and you really, really need a 1 minute or longer, 1 minute probably wouldn't go longer, 1 minute spell to go off, and you guys really need to circle cast it, maybe try it. You just keep trying until it succeeds, or you guys give up and try something else. Maybe you have a bunch of allies. Maybe there's 10 of you. I don't know. Okay, and here it gives a few more clarifications on circle magic, a little advice, and one of the things it clearly specifies is that there's no requirement for level for any of the participants. Okay. The only real level requirement, right, is that the one initiating it, it has to be one of the spells you have prepared and have a spell slot for. Like, that's the requirement. So if you're a 17th level caster and you have a bunch of spells of every level 1 through 9 prepared, then you can have a bunch of first level casters join you and be your circle secondary casters. Only one of you has a level requirement. Okay. And then it just gives a recommendation on if you want to do this, make sure you know all the spells that are available to you and how they're affected by this, and then, plan ahead, things like that. So good, solid advice and nice clarification. So there are several options to circle casting. This works a lot like meta magic. It's basically meta magic, except it doesn't have a class requirement. There's no sorcery points consumed, right? It doesn't consume any other resources other than spell slots. So interesting. Again, I was worried that they were going to really complicate this, but it's not. It's nice and simple, and I think useful. So good stuff. And I like to look at things holistically. It helps me understand and how they relate to each other, compare them, contrast them. So here is all 6 options that you have in one table and everything that they do. Okay. I'm still going to go through each one at a time, show you all the text for it, and talk a little bit about each one. But this is the overall. Okay. So you got 6 options: augment, distribute, expand, prolong, safeguard, and supplant. Okay. There's a column there. Some of them require the secondary casters to expend a spell slot, and some do not. Well, it's 3 and 3. So there you go, half of them. The interesting thing about the secondary spell slot is that there is no indication of any spell slot level requirement. And since they said that the secondary casters don't have a level requirement, it seems like that could be any spell level. So you could be casting a 9th level spell, have your secondary casters expend a 1st level spell slot to help you, and you're good. Some of them have spell restrictions. The spell restrictions all basically make sense, right? Because if and they're all related to the effect, right? Like augment, you can't augment the range of a spell that doesn't have a range. So all the spell restrictions basically make sense, and they do have a fairly powerful secondary effect, which all scale by the number of secondary casters you have. There's no maximum number of secondary casters. So if there's 20 of you, then you got one primary caster, 19 secondary casters, and you get 19 times the effect. Now, one of them does have a maximum, and that is, well, 2 of them have a maximum, I guess. So Augment has a maximum of 1 mile, so you can only increase the range to 1 mile. And Prolong, it doesn't have a maximum on the number of secondary casters, but has a maximum on the effect, which is a maximum increase of 24 hours added to the duration. Now that's 24 hours added. It doesn't increase the duration to 24 hours. So if the duration is already 24 hours, you're adding another 24 by doing this. So for those buff spells, really good idea. All right, first, augment. When you cast a spell with a range of at least 5 feet, you can increase the range of the spell by 1,000 feet per secondary caster contributing to the spell, up to a maximum of 1 mile increase. And in the rules of the game, there is no limit on your sight unless it's dark and you're using dark vision, right? Dark vision has a limit, but normal vision has no limit. So you could be standing on a tower, see an army a mile away approaching, and you could be fireballing them. Or even better, circle of death, right? That is the perfect time to circle of death them, because circle of death, it does about the same damage as fireball, but has a massive AoE, right? It's like a 60-foot diameter, if I recall correctly, right? Sorry, 60-foot radius, which is 120-foot diameter. It is just a massive area. And so if you can cast that a mile away, right? When with the normal casting range, it's 150 feet. Yeah, it's kind of like you're in the middle of the war, right? In the middle of this army fighting. But if from a mile away, that's pretty cool. Blast the army before they get there. You could probably decimate all of them. Distribute. When you cast a spell that requires concentration, you can distribute the mental load of the spell among you and the secondary casters. Once the casting is complete, you and all secondary casters can maintain concentration on the spell. As long as at least one caster who contributed the spell maintains this concentration, the spell's effect remains active. This one's interesting and perhaps one of the weakest options. I'll have to think about it more, because the minimum requirement is still one person maintains concentration, which is what you started with. It just doesn't have to be you now. So I guess you could cast, maybe that's the benefit. You cast a 9th level summon, or 8th level summon creature spell, and then you have one of your 1st level spellcasters maintain concentration. Or better yet, there's 5 1st level spellcasters. You have all of them maintain concentration, because they're probably going to get taken out and lose concentration, right? But 5 of them are maintaining, so as long as one keeps going, you're good. And then you drop concentration and do something else, right? Another big spell. All right, that's the value of this. So that's actually really good. Now you start casting a different spell, right? You cast another summon Draconic Spirit, summon, Conjure Celestial, right? You do a big concentration spell, but that way your secondary casters who are maybe a lot weaker than you, you're handing off your concentration to them for some big spell that only you can cast. That's actually pretty good. That's pretty good. Wow, yeah. Expand. When you cast a spell that creates an area of effect, you can increase one dimension of the spell's area of effect for this casting by 10 feet per secondary caster contributing to the spell. For example, if a spell creates a 20-foot radius sphere, casting it as a circle spell with 2 secondary casters would increase the radius to 40 feet. A spell that creates a line that is 5 feet wide and 300 feet long, cast as a circle spell with 2 secondary casters, could make a line that is either 25 feet wide or 320 feet long. Each secondary caster contributing to the spell must expend a spell slot, no action required, or I should say no additional action required, because they still have to use their magic action to contribute, right? So no additional action required. If the spell fails, these spell slots aren't expended, just like yours. So if you're circle casting a circle spell that requires everybody to expend a spell slot and it fails before it goes off, nobody expends a spell slot. Not you, not them. All right. Um, and and this one's pretty interesting. It notably benefits spherical spells a lot more because those only have one dimension and it's the radius. So fireball, and you have two people helping you. Now it's a 40-foot radius fireball instead of a 20-foot radius fireball, which is all of its dimensions, right? The whole area suddenly got bigger. And if you're on a square grid, that fireball is a 40 by 40 by 40, sorry, 80 by 80 by 80 cube because of a square grid. Whereas a cube shaped spell, you're only increasing one dimension. So if it's a cube that's 10 by 10 by 10, you can only increase one of the dimensions. Now it's 20 if you have two secondary casters. Now it's 30 by 10 by 10. So that particular comparison is pretty interesting. Lightning bolt, for example, as well. It's 100 feet long, 5 feet wide. And you have two secondary casters. Now it's a lightning bolt that's 25 feet wide and 100 feet long. In that case, the line spells are still benefiting a lot because you multiplied the area by 5, which is still nice. Whereas a cube isn't multiplied quite as much, quite as well. But it doesn't feel crippling. It just benefits some spells more than others. It's not like it's bad for a lightning bolt. And in fact, there are plenty of times where increasing the area of a fireball isn't going to do anything more. You already got everybody. But increasing the width of a lightning bolt is a dramatic improvement because it now allows you, whereas you might have only been able to get one or two monsters in that line, now maybe you get everybody. So yeah, it works okay. It's the sphere versus cube, where the sphere wins big and the cube doesn't. Is the big difference there? But you know what? If they asked me between just doing it simply like this and creating some sort of complex calculation of like multiply the area by this factor, which required like complicated math or a bunch of mechanics, I would choose simple. Simple is always the better way to go, and so I like it. I like what they've done here. It's great. Prolong. When you cast a spell that has a duration of 1 minute or longer, you can increase the duration of the spell depending on the number of secondary casters contributing to the spell, as detailed in the table below. Each secondary caster contributing to the spell must expend a spell slot, no additional action required. If the spell fails, these spell slots aren't expended. And so, like I said, it's 1 to 3 secondary casters increases the duration by 1 hour. 4 to 6 increases the duration by 8 hours. 7 or more increases the duration by 24. So even though there's no maximum on the number of secondary casters, there's a maximum on the effect. Now, it's also, like I said before, notable to point out that the duration is increased by this amount. So if it already had a 24-hour duration and you increase it by 24, it's now 48 hours, right? So this suddenly opens up some interesting options, like casting the aid spell the night before. So you've got some spell slots left over, and probably half to 3/4 of the party is a spellcaster. You guys could circle cast, helping whoever's casting aid cast it at their maximum spell slot level that they have left, buffing 3 of you with a bunch of additional hit points, including increasing your maximum hit points, and it's going to last 32 hours. Well, if you have 7 of you. If you only got 4 spellcasters, it's going to last 16 hours, which means it'll last through your long rest and then 8 more hours after that. If you have 7 of you, maybe you guys got some hirelings. Maybe you hire some hirelings just to follow you around. Like, they don't fight. They just follow you around, and they're available for circle casting just for this. So then you can make your aid spell last 32 hours. I like it. This is also particularly nice for like Foresight. Foresight is an awesome 9th level spell. It's one of my favorites simply because of its simplicity and its impact. It's very useful. It's not the most powerful, but it's very useful and simple. And it lasts 8 hours, no concentration. So slap this on it, now you have 32-hour Foresight. Again, and you're using a 9th level spell slot from the day before, and all of your allies are contributing a 1st level spell slot, and you now have a 32-hour duration. Pretty nice. Okay, Safeguard. When you cast a spell that creates an area of effect, you can carve out a safe zone within the area of effect that is unaffected by the spell for its duration. This safe zone consists of a number of 5-foot cubes equal to your spellcasting modifier plus the number of secondary casters contributing to the spell, minimum of one cube. You can arrange the cubes as you like, but each cube must be contiguous with at least one other cube. If the spell's area of effect can be moved, the safe zone moves with it, presumably in the exact same orientation and spot. So if you put the cube in the very center, then that cube is always in the very center as the area of effect moves, which is interesting. So you have those persistent spells like Conjure Celestial, which I don't know why you do this on Conjure Celestial because it doesn't have friendly fire. Let's choose a better one. Moonbeam, right? You could carve out a cube in the center of Moonbeam. That way you could avoid, or maybe like put a line down the center of Moonbeam so you could have it go on both sides, but not hit like an ally. That way you could kind of like navigate it around to avoid friendly fire on your allies. This one is perhaps one of the less useful ones. This one's like the Metamagic Careful spell, but a lot worse. Because Careful spell, you designate a creature, and now that creature is more or less immune to the effect of the spell. They autosave, and they don't take any damage. And it doesn't matter where and how you move the effect around, that creature is just always immune to it, more or less, okay? Whereas Safeguard, you can't say I'm going to protect that creature, and then wherever the spell moves, it just affects whatever it wants. That area within the zone moves with it. So if you can't position it and that area falls over an enemy, that area on that turn is no longer affected by the spell. It also, you're limited by the area, because what if you want to protect a large or huge size creature? You need 4 cubes, 8 cubes to protect a large size creature, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. 8 cubes to protect a large size creature. You need 9 cubes to protect a huge size creature. You need 16 cubes to protect a gargantuan creature. And again, if that's a double negative effect on it, right? If you put 16 cubes together to protect a gargantuan sized creature who's an ally, I mean, I don't know, you're flying on a dragon, you now have a gargantuan sized hole in the area of effect as you move around. So, all right, I think this is the least useful one of all of them. Supplant. When you cast a spell that requires at least one material component with a specified cost that is consumed by the spell, you can reduce the minimum cost of one such material component by 50 gold pieces per secondary caster contributing to the spell. For example, casting Revivify as a circle spell with 2 secondary casters would reduce the material component's minimum cost to 200 gold pieces. Each secondary caster contributing to the spell must expend a spell slot of a level greater than or equal to the spell's level. So this one does have a spell slot requirement on it. Again, no action required or no additional action required. And if the spell fails, these spell slots aren't expended. So this one's interesting as well. I guess in those moments where a lot of times it ends up being like a heal spell, Revivify, Greater Restoration, Raise Dead, Resurrection, those things get expensive, and the spell component is consumed, and you do have, it's one of those moments where you're usually not doing it in the middle of combat. You have people available, the rest of your party, and they're all standing around, and if they have a spell slot, they can contribute, and that can save you a decent chunk of change. This is one, and it has no maximum. The maximum effect is just reducing the spell material component cost to 0. That's the maximum. But Raise Dead is 1,000 gold pieces, and Resurrection is even more. And True Resurrection is 10,000 gold pieces, if I recall correctly. So if you get 20, 200. If you get 200 of your spellcasting buddies together, you can cast True Resurrection for free. So this one is a pretty minor effect as well, especially when you get to those kind of higher levels. You're not really worried about money, but this is nice to just save some bucks, I guess. And even though it's a pretty minimal effect, I would still say this is probably better than Safeguard. Safeguard is just not great. And that's all of the rules for circle spell casting. Now, there are specific spells that came out in this book that have additional effects written into the spell description, and I'll cover those when I get to the spells for all of these. But I'm going to leave it here for now. Circle spell casting, thumbs up. I like it. It's simple, it's usable, and it's meaningful, right? All the great requirements for something being useful and contributing to the fun in the game.